Yeah, no, it's recording. It's recording. Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'm calling the meeting to order now, 7:07 p.m., May 10th, 2021, and we'll start with Mr. Lagares' presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Singh. Good evening, everyone. I'm Manny Lagares, the Borough Planner with the Department of City Planning. I'm also the liaison to Community Board number 12. I'm with the Bronx office. And today we'll be presenting a proposed zoning text amendment called Zoning for Accessibility, a citywide zoning proposal to create more opportunities that increase accessibility in the transit system. I'm joined by Charvi Gonzalez from the MTA. And we are here to speak with you about a proposal that is focused on increasing the accessibility of New York City's transit system and using zoning as one tool to do that. This proposal is a joint effort between the MTA, New York City Department of City Planning, the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, and which builds off a report produced by the New York City Council. The proposal that you will hear about takes the form of a zoning text amendment, which, as many of you know, is essentially an update to the text rules in the zoning resolution. This proposal does have citywide implications, and because of that, it was referred to every community board in the city as of April 5, 2021. But there are some aspects of the proposal that apply more directly in some places than others, so we will try to focus on the specific implications for CD12 in presentations. We are inviting recommendations on this proposal and hope that this discussion can help inform your understanding of it. So I will hand it over to Charvi to help us walk through some of the background on this proposal, and then I will jump in to explain a little about the zoning proposal, and then we will have plenty of time for questions.
Good evening, Community Board 12. Thank you for having us. And we are here to discuss today zoning for accessibility, or ZFA. To put it simply, what is ZFA? Manny, I think something's going on with the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, there's another screen on top.
Okay. Is that better?
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Elevate Zoning for Accessibility is a collaborative effort by the MTA and the City of New York. The MTA and the Department of City Planning are proposing a citywide text amendment that will allow the MTA to work more efficiently with private developers to help achieve system-wide accessibility more quickly. The proposal includes a system-wide transit easement requirement and an expanded transit improvement bonus in high-density areas that doesn't apply in your community board. Next slide, please. Okay. So our current accessibility status, most stations were built before 1950, and at that time, they weren't planned for elevators, or elevators weren't planned for these stations at the time. So, can someone mute their phone? I mean, the computer, please. I'm getting a lot of feedback. So basically, what we're left with is a situation where we're looking to retrofit a 100-plus-year-old system with modern day technology. Currently, only 136 out of 493 subway or Staten Island Railroad stations are accessible. 25 of 39 Long Island Railroad and Metro North Railroad stations within city limits in the MTA system are accessible. So with that said, we have some work to do. ADA, it's important to note that ADA accessible stations include many features that classifies them as accessible. Not just elevators, although in this specific case, we're talking about vertical accessibility. That's the focus of ZFA. Next slide, please. All right, so the impact of limited elevator access is not only for those with mobility impairments or temporary mobility impairments. Some other examples are people with disabilities, permanent or temporary, both, parents with young children who are looking to navigate the system. Sometimes, what should be a short ride turns into a long circuitous ride, trying to navigate, if you have a stroller, not only strollers, heavy packages, shopping carts and things of that nature. Seniors are particularly vulnerable to this, as you know, as they age out of driving and start to rely more on public transportation, or those who never drove for that matter and have shopping to do, and then have to make it back home with these packages that they've purchased. So these are it's not only when we think about elevators, most people assume that it only serves those with permanent mobility impairments, but as this slide indicates, that's clearly not the case. Next slide, please. So many New Yorkers are impacted by a lack of elevators. Of the 8.4 million New York City residents, there are about 550,000 with ambulatory disability, 500,000 children under the age of 5, and 1.2 million residents over the 65 or over. From 2005 to 2015, the number of New Yorkers over the age of 65 grew more rapidly than the rest of the population at a rate of 19.2. That's more than twice the rate of the total population. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the MTA's 2020 to 2024 capital program, we've made historic investments in accessibility. More than $5 billion was dedicated to making 77 stations accessible. 43% of New York Transit stations serving over 60% of riders will have been made accessible through these efforts. With the current goal in this capital program being no subway rider will be more than 2 stations away, we would achieve that through this capital program. Next slide, please. So to, just to go back to one of my initial points where we're trying to, where we're attempting to retrofit a 100-year-old system with modern day technology or fairly modern technology. These are some of the issues that we encounter here. We have narrow platforms, which gives us limited places to place these elevators. Limited entry and exit passages. Above ground, we can see on the top right picture, we have narrow sidewalks, which also limits our ability to place elevators. And then when we do get to the point where we're ready to break ground on some of these projects, we find on unmapped infrastructure underground, which totally throws a wrench in our plans, or what we perceive to be our plans, because sometimes these whether it's water mains, it's electrical lines, or gas lines or what have you, they have to be rerouted, and that time is money in that case. Whenever we have a plan and then we have to go back to the drawing board, it does cost more money. So ZFA, in short, gives us an additional tool. We can go on to the next slide, sorry. Okay, so ZFA gives us another tool in our arsenal, basically, to make the subway system accessible. Existing zoning regulations support accessibility. Existing transit-related zoning regulations result in more accessible stations and other benefits. Support development of transit improvements such as elevators and new entrances. The ZFA program will do these things. Improve street and sidewalk environment by moving entrances off sidewalks, and help align private development with improved station accessibility through better configured stations. And the next slide, I'll hand it over to my colleague in city planning.
Okay, thank you. I'm having a problem on this end. So that Word document, I'm going to put it up again. Right here. It's down here. These are actually, can you guys see this? No, right? Yes?
Yes, we can. Well, the little box, I don't know what's in there, but we see the slide.
Okay, you see the slide with the presentation, correct?
Correct.
Yes, we do.
Okay, yes. Okay, so I'm just going to this down here because these are my notes over here. Second.
There's a box, a gray box blocking.
It's a box?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so those are my notes. I'm going to have to refer to them here. I think it's my script. Okay, and we're on item number 9. Get to
It's good. Oops, it was good before.
It's good before? Okay. Yeah. Let me hit here. Right there, right?
We're good now.
We're good.
Okay. And guess that my slide, I gotta get that in. And I'll move it over. Is it blocking or anything? No?
Yeah, every time you open it up, it blocks the slideshow.
Okay, so let me just move the slideshow down. Okay, I'm gonna put that here. How is it now? Good?
We can see it.
Okay. All right, so just want to make sure that I match it up on my end. Okay. So let's speak with you about the easement. Here we go. Got the correct slide here. An easement is a legal right to use another's land for a specific limited purpose. That's what this
Excuse me,
text
Mr. Lakers,
amendment.
I don't mean to interrupt my chair's meeting, but that's very small. You made it smaller. It's very
Okay.
hard to see.
Okay, sure. Let me here. Okay, so how's that? Is that
Oh, that's
better?
fine. Thank you.
That's fine.
Okay, okay, so then I'm just gonna have to move without my notes. Let me see. Current limitations of easement provisions. As I was saying, an easement is a permission to use a land belonging to another person. Okay, and currently these easements are in very limited areas, as you can see by the slide that you're looking at now. And the purpose of this text amendment is to proposal is to have it more citywide. Okay, and just looking at the picture on the right, this is an opportunity that was lost by the MTA. Had this proposal that we've come up with now been in effect and an easement would have been granted, it would have been very easy for them to have access via this easement that has been created. And the zoning proposal is limited to properties, as you can see on the sketch on the right-hand side. These are two subway stations, and it only affects properties that are within 50 feet of a station, so that you see the area outlined in red, and the green are the building footprints. So everything within that is what's affected. So in other words, if a developer wants to construct a building or is thinking of enlarging an existing residential building, he's affected. So the developer would have to go to MTA and also meet with the chair of the city planning commission in order to obtain what's called a certification. Certification being that they would either grant permission for this easement, that they must be, that he's required or she is required to have an easement, or deny it. Now, these are applicable to zones, the R5, which is residential, medium density. It's limited in terms of height to 40 feet. But you can actually get a 4-story residential building for commercial if it's a commercial overlay, as long as you don't penetrate that sky exposure plane. So what it's applicable to are R5 zoning districts. R5D is also good, R6, R7, R8, and just keep going. If it's below that, they're not required to consult with the chair of the City Planning Commission or the MTA. And of course, within commercial districts, C7 and C8 is allowed there, and all the manufacturing districts.
Hey, Manny, I'm going to go ahead and share so you can go back to your notes, okay?
What was that?
I'm going to share my screen so you can see your notes.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Sorry about this, everyone.
Okay. Okay, this is Jutan Horseman. He's one of my colleagues from the Bronx office. Okay,
Are you seeing it now?
I see it now. And
Okay, go ahead, Manny. Just tell me your next slide.
okay. Okay, so we're good. Slide.
Next slide.
I'm on the certification process now, right? So let me just catch up to that here. And this is the easement certification process where the developer requests a certification from MTA and the CPC chair to determine if an easement is required. Both MTA and the CPC chair have 60 days to decide if it is needed. If it doesn't require an easement, they send out a letter is sent out saying that an easement is not required. If it is required, the MTA developer, chair of the City Planning Commission, determine easement type and the dimensions of the easement. And the developer submits a site plan for approval, and the MTA, CPC chair, have 45 days to review the site plan and also grant the excavation permit. Okay, this is state. There are actually 13 stations in Unity District 12, 3 Metro North stations, and you have 8 subway stations, number 2 line, also the number 5 line. And what this slide is actually showing is what the proposed easement station would be. So anything outlined in green is proposed easement station only, with the exception of the Baychester Avenue. And the reason that not be a proposed easement station is that it's within an R4 zoning district. And as I mentioned earlier, in order to qualify, it has to be an R5 zoning district, commercial overlay, could be an R6, R7 residential district also. And I've added 2 slides so that you would have an idea of what the station, this one is Wakefield and 241st Street. Again, the easement area, we have these easements within 50 feet of a station. It's outlined in red, and the green properties or shade of blue that's there are the building footprints that fall within that. And as you can see, the zoning around the area is R6 on the left side, R7D, and below that you have M1, which is actually not touched by that boundary. So again, these are lots where the developer chooses to enlarge or to construct a new building, you have to go through the certification process. The next slide is Erie Avenue Station. You're on the 2-5 line, and the same thing here. Outline, and you see the properties, you see the zones. This is an R6 majority zoning district here, and you see across on the other side to the right is an R5, but that's not really in that area. Okay, so I'm just a second. And just gonna scroll down. Okay, so in order to facilitate the easement agreements in the future, targeted relief for certain zoning limits would be provided to minimize potential challenges for construction on a site that is subject to the proposed requirements. Easement areas can affect development sites in a number of ways. The easement itself takes up floor space on a site and can reduce available floor area from development itself. The shape and size of an easement can also occupy a large amount of space within a development's envelope. This not only affects the direct area that is occupied by the easement, but also has implications for construction feasibility around such area. Easements can also restrict available space to provide ground floor uses and parking spaces. And depending on the type of development, may create compatibility issues with more sensitive uses, such as apartment units and other residential units. Without any zoning relief, easements can limit construction of a development to its full potential, and in certain situations can result in buildings that lack any relationship with future use of the easement. If the provision of an easement makes it challenging for a development to be built, it would be much more difficult for the transit agency to acquire the easement. A higher level of specificity is needed. Floor area and open space provisions, which would ensure that the accommodation of an easement does not reduce development potential, and to allow greater flexibility in locating an easement on a development site. Height and setback modifications will also be provided to facilitate the accommodation of all permitted floor area that is given to a site. Parking relief would address potential limitations created by the easement on providing required parking spaces, and use allowances made available to support compatible uses around station entrances that will enhance the character of the surrounding area. Similarly, streetscape provisions will also ensure that developments are appropriately designed around future station entrances in a manner that will minimize conflict between transit users entering and leaving station entrances and vehicular traffic. Okay, in conclusion, zoning for accessibility proposes a zoning text amendment to establish a framework for coordinating the siting and provision of transit station improvements with new developments on adjacent sites. As part of this framework, a required consultation process would apply to all developments and enlargements on zoning lots 50 feet of mass transit station, within 50 feet of mass transit stations, and in applicable zoning districts. Where easements are needed, targeted relief from certain zoning limits would be provided to such developments and enlargements in order to minimize potential challenges for construction on a site subject to the proposed requirement. For sites below 5,000 square feet or where conversions are proposed, the requirement would not apply. The provision of easements is voluntary on such sites, and where provided, they also receive zoning relief. In addition to the proposed set of relief, further use, bulk parking, loading, and streetscape modifications would be made available pursuant to discretionary and approval. Here is the timeline zoning for accessibility text amendment. It was referred out on April 5th by the City Planning Commission, and the community boards within the timeline here, the borough president and borough boards have 60 days in which to submit a recommendation on this proposal. Then it goes to the City Planning Commission and subsequently to the City Council and to the mayor's office. Okay, we're at the point that is our presentation, and we welcome any questions that the members of the community board have.
Thank you, Mr. Lagares. So I'm not sure, Alfredo, you still want to ask your question about the, okay, I think Alfredo has a, well, so the question from one of our board members is, will existing developments that fall within these locations be grandfathered in?
No, it won't be grandfathered in. This is a new proposal that going by this text amendment, so that anything that's new, whether an enlargement or new development, will have to go through this process.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I see Dr. Burke has his hand raised. Go ahead, Dr. Burke.
Thank you, Counselor. So, Manny, to me, it seems like, so as you know, I saw this at the Borough Board meeting last month, and it seems like there's some things that were, I won't say left out per se, but I don't think was explained properly. So can you go back to slide number, I want to say it's slide number 14, where you were talking about easements? Okay, go back. No, okay, it's not that one. I'll tell you when to stop. Keep on going.
Okay. It's one easement here.
No, you're going in the wrong direction. It should be toward the beginning of your presentation.
Yeah, in the beginning.
Oh, okay. In the beginning, okay.
Okay, right there. So, okay. No, you just missed it. You just went too far up, man. Anyway, so let me ask my question. It was probably, I think, maybe slide 10 or something like that. But to make a long story short, I remember, because I think either Carol Seymour or Sean Breedy gave this presentation. Yeah, that's it right there, at the Borough Board meeting, in which, they talked about, you kind of sort of mentioned the setbacks, but you didn't say where the setbacks were coming from. So they went into it, because if you remember, I don't know if you were at that meeting or not, but I absolutely grilled them, as well as George, as well as some other community boards, as far as what the developer gets out of it, what we get out of it, versus what are the setbacks, how does that change the landscape of the building? And you didn't mention that in this presentation. So I think that you probably need to mention that to this committee as to how all of that's going to work.
Okay, well, for the presentation, there was the long version and the short version. I do have other slides that would show the information just on ahead.
Right. I mean, because Manny, I'm not trying to crucify you. What I want is, what I want is, I want this committee, because the committee is going to be making a recommendation to the board, which of course then I have to vote on. Either if it comes up this month, then either my first vice chair or my second vice chair may have to substitute for me. But either way, we need to make an informed decision. If there's information that's been left out, then they can't make an informed decision. And based on the presentation that I saw, there's stuff that's been left out that they need to know about before we call for a vote.
Sure, and that's why in the presentation I brought up, because it's a lot of material that's covered, and
maybe I can jump in here.
Version.
Maybe I can jump in here and help out a little bit. So this is the slide with the easement reliefs. So there's basically 5 different types. There's floor area, open space, height setback, parking use, and streetscape. And I'll actually go through all 5 of those for you. So I'll actually tell you like what that easement relief is. So Manny explained, if the MTA decides that this site is needed for an easement, then the developer would be able to have certain amount of relief by going through this process. So with the floor area, we're not actually giving the developers any additional bulk on their site. So say it's a R6A, they get a 3 FAR, they're still getting a 3 FAR. But we're not counting the easement space that the MTA is using as part of their floor area. So while it's still 3 FAR, we're excluding that as part of their bulk, right? So there is that kind of accommodation. The second piece of it is the height and setback portion. So on any site within an R7, basically under an R7 zoning district, we're giving 10 additional feet. So that way that bulk that's being moved can be relocated onto that upper floor. So the idea here is that we're not taking away any development potential or the ability for a developer to build on their site. We're just allowing them to relocate it from the space up onto another floor. There's parking relief up to 15 parking spaces. The idea of this is that if the MTA needs the ground floor for access, then that would possibly be in the same locations that parking would be located. It's usually on the kind of cellar, basement, and first floors in most buildings. So we're really allowing up to 15 parking spaces of relief. Use allowances. So depending on the district, we're allowing at the point of access for the MTA, we're allowing certain commercial uses within 30 feet, basically to allow for basically retail right next to it so that there is some compatible uses around the station entrances that will help with the character and the surrounding environment. And then there's some streetscape provisions. There's really, I'll say, two main ones. The first is that there's no curb cuts basically directly in front of the MTA access, and that there's really no like bollards or other required things that, you know, like tree pits and things like that, that typically would be every 15 feet. But in this case, we're allowing them to be waived right in front of the MTA station easement areas. So that's summarizing the 5 easement reliefs. And I could talk about any of them further. There are, as many mentioned, an authorization and a special permit. So under the authorization, it would allow for up to a 25% height increase. Now, that's not something that we're expecting. The certification for the 10-foot and those relief, that's the typical that we would ever usually have. But in cases where an applicant says, we just can't do it, we have a unique site, but MTA is still requiring us to do it, there is a special relief for up to 25%. Excuse me. And then there's a special permit, which allows an even further modification. But again, that is something that we're not really expecting. It's really more of an option. And if an applicant ever went through that, it would be a full ULURP that would go through the full process all the way through City Council. We can't expect too many applicants would be using that. But again, it's an option for kind of unique sites. So I'd say those are the easement reliefs. There is something that we didn't talk about at all, and that was the bonus. And that's only because it only applies to Community District 4 in the Bronx. And that's for a developer who's actually going to be building out an elevator, but that has no applicability in this district because you have to have at least an R9 zoning district for that to apply. So it's really in the highest areas of the city. Hopefully I gave you a little bit more insight. I can follow up with additional questions.
Did, because as you stated before at the borough board meeting, you're right, there were all community boards were there. So there were, your presentation was much more expansive because of course you had to touch all 12 of us, and there are certain aspects that obviously doesn't affect us, but the one that did to me was the bonus. And if you, I don't know if you were there or not, but I know that George just asked a barrage of questions, as did I, because that does affect us. And so that's what I want, you know, this committee to be aware of. And so again, I'm going to be quiet and let them ask their questions. And I think one of the questions in the chat was, did you guys, I thought that I had Ursula send this presentation out to everybody. I may not have. I do not remember if, Manny, if this was submitted to the borough president's office so that it could be distributed to all the DMs and the chairs. If that was the case, then my community board should have it. If not, then because this is the shorter version, this is not the long version. So I don't remember whether or not I thought you did, but you can correct me if I'm wrong or not.
Dr. Brooke, are you talking about the PowerPoint presentation or the actual application for the zoning text amendment?
Well, what do we see at the borough board meeting last month? I think that's the PowerPoint that I'm talking about. It's similar to this one.
Yeah, at the borough board meeting, it was a little bit fuller presentation because it did have
That's
the
what
bonus.
I thought it was longer. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Did you guys send that out? Because I thought that I sent that to my board, but you know what? I can't remember, to be honest with you.
I don't believe we did. I'm actually looking on our
Because
webpage
if
right
you
now.
did, then they don't have it. Okay. Because I knew I sent out
Yeah.
some stuff, but I don't remember what was what. Because I think there were 3 talks that particular day. But either
I'm
way,
going to post something in the chat, which actually has the link to our webpage, which actually does have the City Planning Commission presentation, which is the fuller presentation.
okay. I thought, I have to go through my notes because I could have swore I sent that out. But either way, I think that I'm glad that you put it in the chat. So like I said, I'm going to be quiet and let the committee ask questions because I know, and board members as well, because this is very, very important as to what, whether or not, Community Board 12 will be, on board. And I'd rather them ask their questions instead of me chiming in. So at this, I'm going to be quiet and open it up as the chair did, excuse me. But
Thank you, Dr. Burke. I think one of our board members, Sydney Blair, has a question. Sydney, you want to ask?
This is Robert Hall. I didn't know. Sydney Blair, do you have a question?
I'm reformulating it. Give me a second.
Okay. I just wanted to make this proposal, and I want to, in essence of all of these stations in the community board district, the ones that you've shown, what exactly are your precise needs that we need to take into consideration or vote for? Can you break it down from that aspect? Is that that'll help us tremendously. And I'm talking about 241st Street down to Burke Avenue, all right, and also I guess it's Morris Park. On the 5 line from Dyer Avenue. What exactly are the issues relevant to what we need to be concerned about? Can you break it down from that aspect?
So can give it. Let me just give it a crack here because I'm not clear on the question. This is Charvy. So you're asking about specific stations or the ZFA as a whole? Because what we're here to discuss is more concept than it is specific stations. It's the zoning for accessibility text amendment, which it would give us the ability on the aforementioned developments that exceed 5,000 square feet and are within the 50-foot envelope. We haven't identified these stations as it is. This is more of a, as I mentioned previously, a tool in our proverbial tool belt that we can use to achieve accessibility.
Okay. I just the only and correct me if I'm wrong, but the only station that has to deal with the applicability of any sort would be Baychester. Is that correct? As far as Community Board 12 is concerned, when it lends itself to easements. Is that correct?
So I can tell that there's some confusion, and I'm just going to backtrack just a second. So you have 13 stations here on your site. You can see here in the image, you have 13, whether it be the MTA, the 2.5, the 6 train, not 6, the 2.5. So you've got all these stations, and the idea for this proposal is that this proposal gives the MTA options in the future for any time a site is planned to be developed next to one of these stations. And you can see here kind of a specific station, the Wakefield 241st Street station. So within 50 feet of any of these stations, so any of these blue lots, if someone went to the DOB to develop one of these sites, that it would be flagged at DOB, and they would have to then come to the MTA, and the MTA would have 60 days to decide if this is a site that makes sense to have an easement. So there's actually nothing planned on any of these 13 sites today. But the idea is that it gives the MTA options in the future to actually develop these and have ADA accessible accessibility on these sites.
Okay, I understand that a lot better now. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I think Ms. Blair is now ready with her question.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So, I just want to be sure, um, this entire proposal as itself, is it in response to that ruling that the MTA needs to make more ADA accessible, like the stations more ADA accessible? Is this what the MTA and I guess Department of City Planning, I guess, came together as like a joint to like propose as how they could work around the city and start getting these elevators up and running at these multiple stations.
This text amendment would allow us to comply with, I think what you're referring to is the American with Disabilities Act. So what this ZFA text amendment, zoning for accessibility text amendment, would allow us is to achieve that mandate more quickly.
There are
That's
other
what I
ways that
was.
stations can be developed, but this is one of the tools through zoning that we have come together and found that this could work, and it will help to develop sites with access a lot quicker. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Mr. Gonzalez was right with the ADA mandate. That was what I was referring to. Thank you.
Are there any other questions tonight?
There's several hands up. They're waving.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Isaac and Miss Benitez both have the hands up.
Actually, good evening, everyone. I really love this idea because we have two stations in our district that I call gateway stations, which are Dyer Avenue and 241st Street, which do not have any ADA access. And this proposal would actually allow the MTA, when they're developing these properties, to actually have ADA access to the sites. When you go to Manhattan and you look at those buildings that have like a Dwayne Reed or whatever, and you have to go through it, and then you end up in the train station and stuff like that. This is what, where all this stuff comes from. We need to think more ahead that the mass transit is going to need us to develop around it more. More people going to be taking a mass transit instead of driving cars and stuff like that to go into the urban area, which is downtown Manhattan and wherever. But we need to actually embrace this, and that's my comment for it.
I see Sydney has her hand up. I'm not seeing any other hands.
Miss Benitez has her hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's not showing up here. Ms. Benitez, go ahead, please.
Okay. In reference to the easements, you mentioned in one of the slides the fact that maybe the building would have to take some space away from the building, and you said put it on top. So is that what you're saying, is that they would have to have another floor to make up for what they took from the side? Am I hearing that?
That is part of the easement allowances in this proposal, yes. It would be 10 feet in most cases and 20 feet in some limited cases.
So that's increasing the building size and the population going into those buildings.
Correct, but I also want to, well, not the population, but it would increase the building size by about 10 feet, which is about a story. I also want to just point out that it isn't a free-for-all for every one of those buildings within 50 feet. It's only on buildings that do actually have an easement and are actually, the MTA said, we need this site. So, when we show this slide with all of these sites, not all of these sites would get that additional 10 feet. It's only, for example, maybe this corner site, which is a larger site, and the MTA says this is a great place for accessibility. We want to use this. It makes sense for the city to allow this one site the additional 10 feet in order to get the easement that we need for accessibility and for the community.
Just to further that point, the MTA would only select the optimal location, the placement of the elevator. It wouldn't be, like they just indicated, my colleague just indicated, it wouldn't be a free-for-all for the whole community to go ahead and stack on another 10, 20 feet.
Do you know how many sites are in that category right now, currently on the books?
Are there any in the next capital budget for this community? Any of the stations planned?
I'm going to share the 2024 capital program. I think in its current state, we're within the 2-station requirement that we've set on the 2024 capital program. So let me just skim it real quick off the top. No, most recently just south of the district, which is not applicable, just I guess for information purposes, we did the Gun Hill Road station. But in the 2024 capital program, there's currently nothing slated.
Do you have a GD cap on that will predict in the future any sites that will fall under this easement plan?
A GD cap? I'm not sure what that is. No, sorry, don't.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Blair?
If they could go back to that slide with 241st on it, I have a question. Right. So given that this corner lot right here is actually, if I'm not mistaken, under construction right now, if we were to recommend this, would you guys, how soon would you guys work with them essentially to get an elevator there?
Unfortunately, this would not apply to any sites that already are vested, essentially. If this is already being built and they have their foundations in, then it would not apply to that site. They're already past that point where they would have the conversation with the MTA. But any other developments would have to be flagged with the MTA.
And once this is passed, then it would be whoever's entering into the permitting process.
Okay, and I understand because I want to say that I've seen signs for it saying that they have the DOB permit, but with everything going on, I don't know if they've actually started any construction.
Then there's a chance. I don't want to say one way or the other because I'm not familiar with that specifics. But if they've gotten their DOB permits, then I don't know. There's a likely chance that they would not need to go to the MTA yet.
I think this Sydney's question is somehow related to Alfredo's. Alfredo, you want to ask your question?
Hi guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
All right. Mr. Hertzman. So I think like for instance, 241st Street, I don't think they have their foundation in yet. So like let's just say it takes them another year to get their foundations put, but that's a big development, like very big. Yeah. If it takes them another year to get their foundations and new buildings approved by DOB, will they fall under this category? Because then they will have to like redesign their drawings, because I mean they're going up like I think it's like 9-10 stories. So if they get another 10 feet to add to the bulk of the building, they could add a significant amount to that existing building they're going to be building there.
That's a good question. I actually am not sure the details of the grandfathering provisions, so I can't speak to that answer. But
okay,
sorry about that. But I mean, there's a chance. I mean, it does get flagged at DOB. Is it this? Can you see my cursor? Is it this site here on the
Yeah,
corner?
yeah. That's the only R7 we
Southeast
have
one?
up here. Yeah.
Okay, we can take a look and see where they're at, what they've done. We won't be able to obviously have that today for the conversation, but
Of course not.
maybe
Appreciate it.
Manny can then relay that information to your district manager George or
Sure.
the
Sure.
chair.
All right,
Is
thank
it
you guys.
Harry? Are you the chair?
Dr. Burke is the chair of the board.
Oh, Dr. Burks. Okay. So
Are there any
we'll
other
relay.
questions?
No, thank you guys.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll turn to Dr. Burke for any questions he might have before we close this segment.
Well, thank you, Harry. I asked a lot of my questions at the borough board meeting. What I wanted for the committee was for you guys to get a full assessment of what I was aware of, and then of course we can make an informed decision. I think the only thing that we were pushing back on was just trying to make certain that, again, if we voted for the text amendment, because again, it doesn't really. I won't say it doesn't apply to us per se, but I think the only building I thought of was the one that Sydney and Alfredo mentioned on 241st Street. So I think Mr. Hall asked a question about the Gun Hill Road, and you were talking about the number 5 line on the Gun Hill Road, correct? I think somebody said Gun Hill Road, because there's only really 2 stops on the Gun Hill. I mean, outside of Metro North, it's the 2 and the 5.
Well, yeah, you're right. But as far as easements were concerned, I mentioned Baychester because I wanted to know, is that the only easement circumstance in our particular area? But as far as Gun Hill Road is concerned, I get it. I understand it.
Right. I think what this is for the most part, is it's not really a retrofit, but it's really a for new development. And as you know, Mr. Hall, as well as everybody else, is that we're trying to prevent a lot of overdevelopment in here, but at the same time, we want to be ADA compliant. I think my biggest problem when I heard this last month was the same thing, same questions that Ms. Benitez raised earlier. So she pretty much is glad to know that I guess that we're thinking alike, because that was my issue with it. But other than that, I don't have anything else to add. This is mainly for you guys, counselor. So, if you're done, I'm done. But like I said, I just really wanted you to get a full idea and not have anything left out, and make certain that you have a full understanding of what they're going to be asking us to vote on. So Manny, let me get to you. So if I'm not mistaken, we're going to take this up again this month at Borough Board meeting, right?
Yes.
Right. So that means that the community board has to vote on it by the next meeting.
Well, I'll defer to Jutan on that. Jutan?
So, I guess what is the timing for your meetings?
Well, the next community board meeting is on the 27th.
Okay.
So what you in essence you need is a recommendation tonight, because then once it comes from the community board, then we vote again on it at the June borough board meeting, correct?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have all my dates. I didn't have all my dates lined up for the borough board meetings.
If I understood the timeline correctly, it was presented at the April borough board meeting, and then the directive was for, like, in this case, Manny is our representative, but for all of the DCP representatives to go to all of the community boards and give this presentation, which is what you're doing tonight. Then the community boards vote on it, and then the chairs come back, more likely than not, in the month of June. Because, as I said, our borough board meeting takes place before the community board actually meets. And so either way, I'm going to need a recommendation from the community board, and that's going to be based on what this committee decides. So if I'm not mistaken, that's what I heard the timeline was. Now, correct me, Manny, or anybody else, if I'm wrong on that, but that's what I thought the timeline was.
Yes, the timeline was 60 days for the community board, borough board, and borough president, all within that time. But again,
yeah, I just looked it up. It looks like May 20th is the next borough board meeting, where we'll be going back to present the this proposal.
The borough board meeting is on the 20th? No, it's normally the fourth Thursday of the month.
Okay, well, I might have my date wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
that's the borough board meeting is normally fourth Thursdays of the month. So, and I know that because it's the same day as our community board meeting. So either way, you're asking for, if I'm not mistaken, now when does the borough board have to vote at the next borough board meeting?
Yeah, I mean, because the referral period of 60 days would end before their
Right.
the June meeting.
So that means that, so either, like I said, because I may not be back in time, so either my first vice chair, second vice chair would have to attend that meeting if I'm not here. But either way, you know, what I'm hearing is basically this committee has to give a recommendation tonight to bring to the next general board meeting, because then of course the executive committee needs to discuss it at the next EC meeting. Then it has to go to the community board in order for the either myself or you know, the first or second vice chair to represent us as far as what we want to do, whether we want to support the text amendment or not, based on the timelines that I'm hearing. And correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Singh?
Yes.
Singh?
So
Yes, I do have one more slide to go. Jutan, can you bring up that slide with the upcoming text amendments?
Oh,
Yeah.
where is it?
That's let me see.
Right there.
Yeah, there we go. You got
There
it.
it is.
Okay. We did the zoning, of course, tonight, the ZFA. However, we do have 4 other text amendments that are very important that I'll be presenting to Community Board number 12. The Fresh 2, which is the food retail expansion to support fresh food text amendment. Also, the health and fitness text amendment, as well as the open restaurants text amendments and the hotel special permit. So I had spoken with George, and I believe I would be on your next land use committee meeting to present these other items. But let me just take one thing back here. Let me see. The Fresh 2, since it doesn't impact.
Let me ask a question. I thought that we had talked about, well, the community board, I know I represented the community board for a hotel text amendment vote that Councilman Raleigh had asked me to attend. But if I'm not mistaken, have you presented the hotel text amendment to the community board as of yet?
No, I'll be presenting it next month.
Okay.
Yes.
It was just referred out last week. So the official referral, I believe, starts today. So it's about 60 days from today.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
And Jutan, I'm right in that Fresh 2 won't go to Board 12 since there doesn't really impact Board 12.
That's correct. There's no applicability to Board 12.
Yeah. So instead of 4 presentations, it'll be 3 more presentations. Thank you.
was that it, Mr. Lagares?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you guys very much, Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Horstman as well. Dr. Burke, how are we proceeding at this point?
I guess my recommendation to you is that you know, you need to find out if you have a quorum or not. So, you know, based on your list, determine whether or not we have a quorum, and then you can discuss, you know, the committee can discuss it. You know, we already know where, you know, Mr. Isaac thinks, you know, he's in support of the amendment. So, you know, check your list and see if we have a quorum of your committee. And like I said, we know that Nicole Weir is no longer, you know, member of the community board. And so if you have a quorum, then we can discuss it as a committee and then make a recommendation via the vote.
So I think we have, of the 10 remaining members, I think we have 5 present, and that includes you, Dr. Burke.
Okay, now I know, let's see, we're missing tonight. I know we're missing Carla. You know, we're missing Carla. We're missing Carl Anzano, and we're missing
Anthony Reed.
Right,
Ms.
so I believe
Bond.
Keith, right? I don't have my list in front of me.
And Carl Stricker.
Paul Stricker.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so we're missing what, 4 members? All right. So we have a committee of what? So you're saying I know Mrs. Bond is here. I know Mr. Hall is on that committee, correct?
We're missing 5. We're missing
5.
Mr. Lanzano, Mr. Reed, Ms. Bond, Mr. Stricker.
No, Ms. Bond is here.
Denise Bond is here?
Yeah, she's
oh, Ms.
here.
Bond, I'm so sorry. So then we're only missing 4. We're only missing 4 members.
Okay, so you have, if you include me, you have a quorum, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
So you have because Mrs. Benitez, yep. So you have a quorum, so you can actually call for the, and Sydney is here too. So so you can, you can discuss it and call for the vote.
Okay, so I'll go through the list of names as I have them written here. Keisha Lago Martin, how do you vote, please?
Well, hang on, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. So what you make sure you want to have a discussion amongst yourselves first before we call for the vote, because there may be some more unreadiness. And even though I know that city planning and MTA gave a presentation,
that light came out perfect. Still, do not move.
Is it who is that in the background? There must still be a little bit of discussion. Then you can call for the vote. You can shut the discussion off and then call for the vote. So I don't know if there's any more discussion, but again, that's probably the procedure that you should follow. You just ask if there's any more discussion.
Well, I see Sydney has her hand raised. Sydney?
I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear me because a couple of people are unmuted. So with all the background noise, it's gonna like muffle me out in some ways. But I don't really have any strong like opposition to this. I think the only thing that I would appreciate from the MTA and Department of City Planning is that, when they get around to getting easements or whatever the case may be for these elevators, they come back to us and let us know, hey, just like hey, this station, let's say it's Baychester, for example. Hey, Baychester Avenue is going to get this elevator. This is who we are in the works with, X, Y, and Z. Other than that, I think it's a good idea as well. I agree that a lot of these stations need elevators and easier ways to get up into the train stations.
So Ms. Blair, this is Charlie Gonzalez. So typically, when through our capital program, we identify the stations for ADA upgrades. I can share that link, the 70 stations that were identified in the 2024 capital program. And then once we onboard, we put out a request for a proposal, and we onboard a contractor, someone who's going to undertake the work, and we have the logistics identified. We go back to the community boards and the respective committees, and we present the program, and then we take it to the full board once it's once we get to that point. So at this that's how our process typically works. I'm going to share the 70 stations here. So on the next capital program, when that's unveiled, then there'll be I suspect, right? I don't have my my genie hat, but I suspect there'll be another round of ADA accessible stations, and then at that point, that's kind of like the alert, and then we dig into it once we've onboarded contractors and what have you.
Okay, I have one more thing on the Baychester station. That's the one station that was on that map that's not required to have an easement, and the reason for that is that it's zoned below R5. It's an R4, so it won't qualify.
Mr. Isaac?
One of the big things I see in this whole proposal is that the MTA is asking for the right to refuse the sites when they're being developed. And, you know, all they're saying is that if a developer comes and they want to develop the area, we should give them the chance to upgrade the stations. So, you know, which is not, to me, that's nothing big. That's a no-brainer. And we should do this for affordable housing. We should do this for a lot of different things.
Ms. Benitez, did you have a comment?
I don't have too many problems with it. I just was more concerned about what was going to happen in the future. But if you're coming back to the committee and the board for every project that you go out with for, I don't see a problem with this.
And if I just might add, can I add something, Mr. Singh?
Ms. Bond, yes, go right ahead.
Yes, I would agree that as long as the community board is being informed about what's to come, it's not just, oh, well, you know, we agreed to this and then, you know, anyone can come and put whatever they want, they still have to come back to it. I don't see a problem with it either.
Right.
The gun council gentleman has a question.
What I'd like to say is my only concern would be 241st Street, and that's because of possibility of that Furman Avenue situation taking place, which would really dilute 241st Street if we were to include this particular proposal. So time is of the essence, just with regards to that. All right, I'm a little bit concerned about that. Other than that, I'm with the program, but I don't want 241st Street, and something that needs to be taken into consideration to some extent. We don't have a timeline for that permanent community project, so you know. That being said, you know, it's hard to determine, you know, what's underlying here.
Any other questions or comments before we? Yes, Sydney.
The gentleman earlier had mentioned that Baychester would not be eligible for a station. I'm not sure if I missed that in the presentation, but if you could you just briefly explain why?
Okay. The slide that you're looking at, you see the stations, correct? No?
Yes.
Okay. Looking at that slide, the stations that are in green, those are our proposed easement only stations. If you look at Baychester, it's not in green. And the reason for that is that it's not within a higher zone, such as an R5, R6, R7. It's an R41 zoning area. So that's what disqualifies it from being an easement station only.
Yeah, and I actually want to add to that. So that doesn't mean that that station wouldn't have accessibility in the future. It just means that it wouldn't be using this program. Sharvi from the MTA was saying that this is just one of the tools that they use for developing stations and getting access. That, you know, especially in lower areas, there's other methods that they have, but just the easement option would not apply to that Baychester Avenue station.
I think we should say that that particular plot of land that that station is on is all unto itself, and no one else will be actually building around it or on it. Am I correct?
I mean, I would say, just to put what Jutan just said in context, is that given the zoning surrounding this station, it would not be ZFA eligible.
Exactly, but it won't preclude, let's say if a developer wants to come into that area, buy that station, to enlarge or construct a new building, he can do that.
It just wouldn't apply to ZFA at this
Exactly.
at this juncture for the purposes of this presentation.
Any other comments, questions before we take a vote?
Harry, just one thing, and excuse me because I'm having a sneezing fit over here, so I may have missed this.
Don't worry about it. Go right ahead.
Thanks. So I understand that if the 241st Street development already has a foundation, that they wouldn't have to comply with this should we vote for this to move forward. But could we make the request that if they haven't, even though they may have gone through their processes, that they have to comply with this as well?
Mr. Lagares, you want to take that question?
Well, you can add conditions to your recommendation. Might want to make that a condition.
So I don't know how the other committee members feel, but if the effort is to make the stations accessible, right, and we're putting up new developments, we want those folks who are living in those developments to be able to easily access transportation. To me, there's no point in putting things in place or building new things that aren't going to have access to things that may happen later. Does that make sense? No? Do folks agree? I mean, at least we can make the request.
This is Robert Hall. I agree. My only concern when it lends itself to 241st Street is the Furman Avenue housing situation that may be forthcoming and the timing of that. But I completely understand what you said, and I agree with you. But I just did not want to have too much work in that one area at one time because that's over congestion. That's another problem that we could walk into with this situation. And that's my only concern at this point.
I think it's worth also pointing out that while that site is currently being developed, there eventually would be other sites that would be developed that would possibly work if that site didn't work. Like I don't even know if the MTA would, when they're in their 60-day period, say that that's the site that they want, right? So I understand the question about it kind of essentially being grandfathered, and that's something we can follow up with you on. And that could be part of your recommendation as far as, modifying the grandfathering rules to make it so that, I don't know, station can be looked at. I don't know, I'd have to think about it as well. But that you could have some sort of non-grandfathering rule in there about when things are looked at for at least existing projects. So, but even if that did apply, it may not be a site that the MTA says this is a site that we want to have access either, right? Like that's the idea of going through that process with the MTA and having them weigh in.
Yeah.
I
understood.
Okay, Sydney?
What's unique about the 241st Street station is that right there is also the train yard, and a lot of those properties, like if you're looking towards the bottom left corner of this image here, I want to say that at least this big property here at the bottom left, I really want to say that that might be an MTA building there. So to Mr. Horseman's point, yeah, maybe this building here at the corner may not be their ideal spot if we were to move, if the MTA were to move forward with this. But if I'm not sure how familiar you are with the area, but if it was any, like, if it was anything else, that this corner lot here, this where that R7, I want to say that's a D, that R7D right there is definitely where, if they were to propose an easement in for this station, they would more likely than not put it there unless they want to move their own buildings.
Any other comments or questions for the gentleman? Yes, Ms. Benitez.
I just wanted to say, can we bring this to a vote as to the recommendation from the transportation, from the land use committee?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any objection to that proposal?
No.
Okay.
Not at all, Sir Chair. So remember, your voting members, you probably already have this, so you know who your voting members of the committee are, correct?
Yes. So
Okay.
let's start with, I'll take a yea or nay from you, Keisha Lago Martin.
Yay.
Ms. Blair?
Yay.
Mr. Isaac?
Yay.
Ms. Benitez?
Yay.
Ms. Bond?
Yay.
Yay for me. Dr. Burke?
Well, if you guys say yes, we'll go with it.
So I think we have everyone's in favor of it. I think that therefore concludes this portion of our meeting tonight. I want to thank Mr. Gonzalez, Mr. Lagares, and Mr. Horstman.
Thank you, Community Board 12. Thank you, Mr. Singh. Have a good evening, all.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we close our meeting tonight, I think Mr. Isaac and was it Ms. Blair? John?
Miss Martin.
Oh, Ms. Martin, Keisha. So we'll hear from you guys now.
Yes.
John Isaac is going to speak on our behalf.
Okay.
Before you guys can begin, Ms. Benitez, can you mute your mic? Because there's a lot of feedback coming from your mic and it's kind of difficult. Yeah, thank you.
Essentially, good evening, everyone. We when we're looking at the pear tree proposal, we kind of left everything open with them, and we need to come up with ideas for when developers come to us as a board that we could actually give them to develop their, like in development, we could give counter proposals or share ideas with them. And some of the things that that you guys were sharing with us was educational and training center. We're thinking about an urban farm, which includes like hydroponics. And a couple of things I was looking at was like a brewery, a microbrewery, things that were, because that area is like light industry. So a microbrewery could fit in there. A site where there's alternative energy. I don't think a wind farm could fit there, but an alternative energy site. A co-working space where people could share. It's like a rental office space where you could rent an office for like a month, whatever, just to do like small businesses if you need a quick expansion. A mechanic village where you could share care and do repairs and actually do training. So you could actually go there, work on your own car and actually learn from other people. A furniture making center was something else that we could have actually put in the pear tree area. One other thing we were looking at was a food distribution center. probably appliance repair, a bakery could have actually worked in that area, like a coffee roaster type situation could work. A place that does commercial printing could work in that area. Even entertainment, like rock indoor, like a building that has like indoor rock climbing, zip line slash a gym, a virtual training center, a produce farm could work in there, and a training facility for construction workers, and pop-up at a pop-up shop area where we could have pop-up shops. And we could also have in that site, we could also have photo studio, a filming location, a fashion photo shoot area, and training facilities for officers and EMTs and stuff like that. So I just want to bring these ideas to you, and you could tell me what you think about those ideas.
Chairman, can I speak? Yes.
Yes.
I like the idea of, in particular, for our youth to be able, youth or anyone for that matter, to be able to learn a trade. So I like the idea of the mechanic, of something mechanical, whether it's something with fixing cars or maybe learning a trade, carpentry, electronic, roofing, something that's a viable option for, especially in particular for a young person to develop their skills and to make, be able to maybe, make their own business for themselves, something like that, or anything with plumbing, heating. I know HVAC is another good way to earn a living when you have those certifications. So something where you're going to have a trade where you can earn a certification that when you come out, you are employable. Something like that, or the hydroponic farming, I think, is another really viable idea for that space, and that would be positive for our community.
So if I can add to
let me can I comment before we continue, because I have to get this out before I forget, and because it's very important when we talk about this too. So let me just mention that Mr. Isaac did a very good job with ideas. And let me just mention something that's critical, because actually I forgot to mention this to you, Attorney Singh, when I was speaking with you yesterday, was, we thought about 3 sites in particular. The Pear Tree site is one. We want to have this discussion because, as Mr. Hall said, with Mayor de Blasio's MIH designations, that the Furman Avenue project is going to be coming before us. So we want to look at that site, as well as we were talking about the site across the street from the Home Depot. The reason that, those 3 sites and others are important is because Councilman Riley and I were on the phone probably about a month ago. And he asked me to present to the chair and the vice chair of the Land Use Committee 3 properties that we want to see developed, if we can develop it ourselves. And the reason is because, as you might imagine, these developers are coming to him, knocking down his door. And, he pretty much told me, quite frankly, I'm tired of the overdevelopment of this neighborhood. And he's like, Dr. Burke, if anything, I want to see more, not more affordable housing, but I want to see a different type of housing, which, I'm glad to hear him say that, because he and I are aligned on that. So what we want to do, what he challenged me to do, in which I'm now bringing this to the vice chair of the Land Use Committee and the committee as a whole, what 3 properties would we want to see the most developed? In other words, what 3 properties, if you had to rank them, would you want to see developed in this area? And if so, I need a specific proposal. So in other words, for what I told the councilman was, for instance, with the MIH site, is Mr. Isaac said, he talked about vocation, and Mrs. Bond said this as well, vocation. Well, here's why vocations are important. Vocations are important because, of course, you can then get apprenticeships. Once you then get apprenticeships, like Mr. Reed, that's why I wish he was here, you could then get a high-paying job. Once you get a high-paying job, then, of course, you can now buy a house. So instead of affordable housing, you can now get more market rate or even condos. He was thinking about co-ops and condos type of housing. But my thing is, once you get that job training, then of course, because everybody's not cut out to go to college, and that's fine. Once you get that job training, electricians make a heck of a lot of money. You know what I mean? I'm going to say a hell of a lot of money. They can make a lot of money. Same thing with, carpenters, plumbers, or anything else. And so that was one of the things that I told the councilman. And one of the things that he also said was that I know MTA is looking at that site again for something else. Fine, as long as it's not housing. But, what he wants from us is how would we, if we had any ideas on not only that pear tree, but the site in front of Home Depot, as well as the one that these developers are going to come with, telling us what they want. We need to come up with what we want. And so what I'm going to ask this committee before anybody else continues is, what 3 sites would you want to see the most developed? And using Mr. Isaacs and Mrs. Martin's ideas, what would you want to see, and rank them in that order and give them to me so that I can give them to the councilman? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burke. Sydney, we'll take your question first, then we'll go to Keisha.
I wanted to say that I like the ideas that were proposed by Mr. Isaac, but I think that this his whole, like, the whole point of coming to these developers when they come to us to try and give them suggestions in a sense is in a way connected to that survey that ad hoc committee is working on, trying to get out and about within our community to see what is needed. That was all I wanted to say.
Go ahead, Keisha.
So I think that Dr. Burke has a very good point. Once we identify which locations, then we can identify what would be best served at those locations. So maybe we should start there.
If I can add, I'm sorry, Ms. Martin, were you finished?
I'm done.
Okay. I agree with what you're saying, because I think that when we look at the sites themselves, depending upon their location, they lend themselves to certain things. I actually think that the site across from Home Depot, if it were developed as some sort of a recreational space or a green space, that would be a good location for that. Whereas the pear tree site, I think that would be a better location for some sort of a training or some sort of light industry type of site.
Thank you, Ms. Bond. And I actually agree with that idea as well. I think when we think of the use of the property, we must consider the location and the benefits that come with the fact of where it's located. Mr. Isaac, I thought you had unmuted yourself.
Yeah, just for a second, but you were talking, so I muted it back. But I totally agree with what you guys are saying. But one of the things that I want us to pay attention to is that the land that across from Home Depot was actually wetland area type marsh land. If we go and we put hardscape in that area, we're going to create a potential flooding area down there. That land actually sucks up a lot of the water when we have storms and stuff. So this is just one of the things I always thought about, because in the previous proposal, we were going to put like 10,000 car parking lot, some huge, ridiculous number of impervious square footage over there. And I just thought it was just abominable that we're gonna just destroy that whole area. One of the things that I noticed driving through that area is the vacant stores and stuff over there. The restaurants are closed over there from before. There was a place that had a bank or something. It was in front of that supermarket, So we need to pay attention to that. We don't need to over mall the area or over commercialize that area, you know?
So given what John Isaacs just said about that particular location, perhaps that would be a great space for like a sustainable new street, for example. So they could plant trees. So the trees we know would absorb a lot of that moisture. There could be not necessarily a track like a running track, but just like really open space where people could bike, walk. Um, there could be some gardens. I didn't know about the terrain, but given that, that might be a suitable space for that type of development.
And that was my next question to Mr. Isaac also. So do you agree that that space could be then lends itself more to gardening and a green space and recreational space? Would you suggest that?
Totally, I totally agree. I actually think that we could have that as a place where we could do urban farming and then actually have like a market on the weekends or during the week where the same food that's grown there could be sold to the residents.
Yes, Ursula.
All right, so I just have a question. How are you going to pay for this? Where are you going to get the funding from to do this? Because that property is worth millions of dollars. It's owned by the state right now. So how are you going to pay for it?
Well, Ursula, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think, as I said before, I think that the one thing that the councilman and I was talking about was doing just that. We were talking about involving, EDC and, some other entities. So I think, he's got his homework to do, and I think we've got our homework to do on that. But I do believe that that was one of the things that, we discussed in that proposal. Obviously, another thing that we discussed was a partnership. So, again, I know he was telling me that the MTA may be looking to repurpose that land again. After all, it's theirs, from what I think from what he told me. So it's possible that even if they repurpose it, he and I were discussing other things that could go on there. Would we want luxury condos? I think my proposal to him was, again, the farmers market was it, and I told him the reason why. It's something similar to what we've been hearing earlier about how to bring the rates of all the chronic diseases that we have down in CB12. So to your question, Ursula, I mean, obviously we as a community board do not have that kind of money, but with strategic partnerships that we could form and that we're looking to form, that would be one way of procuring it. Obviously, whoever we partner with would have to have some sort of financial incentive to make money, but something it'll be a win-win, beneficial for us and beneficial for them.
Right, because to my understanding, the property is actually owned by EDC, and they have a proposal going now that brings senior housing and some retail stores.
Right. That was, I think, one of the things that that I had heard as well. And so I think, the councilman is still trying to, as he said, figure out the labyrinth. So, hopefully, he's a little bit more settled now and he can report back, because I haven't had a chance to talk to him since. But, that was one of the things that, he and I discussed, as I said, about a month ago, on the phone. But you're absolutely right, it is owned by EDC, and that was one of the things that we were trying to get, because we're kind of sort of tired of housing. I think the one thing that, as I said before, that he and I are aligned on is that we're tired of the overdevelopment of all the housing, and again, if it was more proportional throughout the city, then we wouldn't have an issue with it. But there are other things outside of housing that Community Board 12 is can be useful for.
And if I could just add, I think that what makes the project that I just mentioned attractive is that it would pair nicely with, a senior housing development with some retail locations. So if folks are going, to bike or, to visit the gardens, then potentially they would spend their dollars in those retail locations. So it's just an idea, but I am thinking about things that could partner well with. So if a developer comes to us with their idea, what can we add to the project that we would enjoy and we could use in our community so that they get what they want, right? But then we also get something that we need and want to.
Yes, Mr. Hall.
The only thing that I'm really concerned with, it's only been mentioned a while back, and that goes back to pear tree. Please test the soil. It is very important. All right. Ursula knows what I'm talking about. Hexagon Labs. That area, you really got to take a deeper insight look. And that's my major concern. I've said it before, and I really hope that somebody really takes a good look at that area before they start making decisions that they're going to be sorry they made. That's all I got to say.
Well, let me comment on that, Mr. Hall. So, as you know, I've taken some heat for that. Even though you warned us, and it was very well mentioned. I mean, it was mentioned at the January meeting, but I know some people were upset that I'd mentioned that. But I'm gonna keep on mentioning it because you absolutely mentioned it. Hexagon Labs was pretty much how should I say it? They were a bad actor when it came to environmental disaster, and as you well know, that was an EPA Superfund site that the state cleaned up. I think it was finally remedied, and I want to say they got a clean bill of health in 2015 or 2017. I don't remember, but either way, the groundwater is contaminated, but the drinking water is not, and that's due to the nature of how we're drinking. But that groundwater is still contaminated. Based on the data that I've seen from that site, all soil samples have to be tested until the year 2042 because the site was so contaminated, right? And I think that's the documentation that I saw. And again, it's public knowledge, but that site has to be tested until the year 2042. So to your point, again, anybody who builds there will, have to be very, very careful. Now, I mean, I know that I don't know what the data is on the VOCs, and that's what's called volatile organic compounds, because I think the site is still emanating that. But again, I haven't seen the data on that. I would presume that it's minuscule, or else the state wouldn't have declared the site active. So I would imagine that whatever VOCs are there are there in trace amounts and wouldn't be that harmful. I would imagine that would be the case. I wouldn't imagine the state would allow itself to be liable for a lawsuit. But to that end, I think that's just my only comment on the Hexagon site. But I think we have to do our due diligence no matter where it is, whether it's there or somewhere else,
Okay. All right. I mean, I thought it was 2030, but good. Just follow up as much as you can on that because it is vitally important. All right.
I thought it was 2042. That's what I thought I read, but I mean, it could be 2030, but I thought I read 2042 somewhere.
Okay. No problem.
Okay.
Dr. Burke, to that end, I just have a question in reference to that. So because of what you're saying about whether it's 2030 or 2042, really housing should not be put in that site, nor should it really be retail. Is that what you're saying?
Again, if it were me, I wouldn't open myself up to a lawsuit, but that's me. Again, if people see an opportunity to make money, they're going to do that. Again,
Right, go ahead, sorry.
What they'll point to is, of course, they will point to the fact that the site has been remediated. So, but like I said, I personally, I would not build housing there. I would, do something else with the property, but that's just me.
So just to have an understanding of that, so when you talk about like construction, are we saying that we really shouldn't put any retail there either, and maybe because you don't want to like dig down into the ground, but so far, or just to educate me a little bit. I'm not sure.
Well, now the pear tree site is in an industrial area anyway, so you're not going to put any retail in an industrial area. So,
I'm sorry. I was speaking about the site right across from Home Depot. That's what I was really thinking.
Right? No. Well, no, that's a totally different ball game. So no, we're talking about the pear tree site. The pear tree site, the proposed pear tree site was the former Hexagon Labs. So no, we're not talking about the across the street from Home Depot.
Oh, okay.
Ursula, I thought you had your hand up.
No, it was okay. I was just gonna say you cannot build on a pear tree. House it on pear tree, rather.
Any other comments, questions, suggestions?
So let me make a recommendation, Mr. Chairman. So what I recommend is let's take three properties, the top three properties, and ideally what we would like to see and present that to us so that we can present it to the councilman. And I think because if we give him something to fight with, then the collaborative relationship that he discussed, we can go. But we can't just sit here. Let's talk about it. But then, which is what we're doing now. But let's come up with him with some recommendations, and then he can come back to us so what he's hearing on his end, and then we can go from there. I think that'll be the way to move forward.
Okay. If I could just make one other recommendation. If we could then have a collaboration between the Parks Committee and the land use, because what we're asking for the Parks Committee is that they develop more green space within our community board, and we can use the data that we got from the New Yorkers for Parks and give that. If we looked at the Home Depot site, for example, and we can give Councilman Riley that information along with that data to support that idea of making it more of a green space or recreational space.
Let me say something about that site, the EDC site. I know we have the Y coming up, opening up in May, I think. Oh, is this May? Yeah. And I know that's up north. We haven't said anything about having some kind of facility down here in this area. We have a need for that. We're talking about recreation spots and things like that. Well, why can't we get someone to subsidize another Y in this area? And I think that's the perfect lot to do it in.
Ms. Benitez, this is Robert Hall. If I remember correctly, that facility, that Y that they made was to encompass the entire Board 12 neighborhood. All right, it's large enough, supposedly. Okay, it just happens to be in that one section where there's a, there's a lot of households per se. But that was the intent initially. But I'm going back, into the 90s. But that was the intent. That facility should be large enough for all of our youth within the Board 12 area to congregate. And that was the idea. Now we got to hold everybody to the fire on that, but that was the initial idea. All right. There was only going to be one facility and that was it. But they looked everywhere and they came up with that area. But we can have that conversation with Mr. DeCastro and them because they're up on it. But that was really the intent. So, but if we can find something else, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. Thank you.
Ursula?
Can I say hi? So if I'm remembering correctly, the first choice for a youth center was that lot on Gun Hill Road. they would not use that lot on Gun Hill Road because there's no bus service over there, and MTA refused to add additional buses. So that's why they did not go with that location.
I have a quick question for Ursula. Do we know the status of the two properties on Baychester and Strang? One is like an old diner or something like that, and one is just a big empty lot with junk in it.
The diner is coming to us soon. He wants to build, did that come to us? We discussed that, didn't we? Or he wants to build some stores and a bank where the diner is.
Yeah.
That should be coming up soon to coming back to us soon, rather. The other one, the lot, I'm not for sure, but I'll check it. You talking about the one across from Chase?
Citibank or whatever?
Yeah, Citibank. All right, I'll check on it tomorrow and let you know.
Okay.
Ms. Benitez, did you want to say something? Okay. Dr. Bark, just for my own edification, are we supposed to tonight narrow down 3 properties and identify possible uses for them? Dr. Bark?
Is he on still?
I would think so, but it sounds like we're kind of split up here. We're not even coming with definitive ideas for each site. So, but if he needs it tonight, do we have a consensus of what we want for each of those sites, those 3 sites?
I don't feel like we have a consensus. I think this is the first time we're brainstorming this as a committee. So Dr. Burke might be away from his computer.
Yeah, I had to step away. I step away. So here's what I suggest, because it's getting on 9 o'clock. So my suggestion is this: if we have the sites identified, which I think we do, then what I would like to do, because as you guys know, I'm going to be leaving within the next couple of hours, and so the first vice chair will then take over for me. What we can do, I'll still be checking my email, is that come up with what you want to see at each site. So each of you collaborate amongst yourselves. If you don't want to stay here, then collaborate amongst yourselves. But I need that by next week. So, or before I get back. And like I said, if I get back, it'll be the last, if I come back in May, it'll be the last week in May. So I need that so I can get to the councilman, because the more time we waste, then of course, that's the more time somebody else is already out of the property. So we need to get that done ASAP.
So is it safe to say you need this information by the week of the 17th if you're returning the following week?
I would say I would have a drop dead date of no later than the 24th. That way you guys can communicate amongst yourselves. I mean, it shouldn't take that long, but between the site across the street from the Home Depot, what we would like to see, because Ursula's saying what one of the things they're proposing, the councilman is saying something else. Either way, somebody else has an idea for what we want. We talked about a farmer's market initially. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is let's have something concrete for them. Same thing with the site at Furman Avenue, which of course is the one I'm really concerned about, because you already know the developer wants to put up housing. What can go there? What will fit in that space? That's 47. I want to say 4541 Furman Avenue, I think is the address. And of course, the last one is a pear tree. So we know that the developer want to put storage in, and of course, hydroponics. So why they want to put hydroponics? Because they knew it would make money, right? And for me, if that were whatever you guys go with is fine by me. But if that were hydroponics, then of course you would avoid planting anything in the soil. And not only that, you can still grow your own fresh food. And then you could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You could alleviate the health problem by making the space more resourceful and of course green. So those are my suggestions. But it's not, as I said before, this is a collaborative effort. So whatever you guys come up with is fine by me. I just want something to be able to go to the councilman with and say, Councilman Raleigh, here's what we discussed as a land use committee, and here are our recommendations. I just want to give him something that he can fight with.
Okay. Alfredo?
This recommendation is just for your committee only, or the board as a whole? Because there's only like 12 of us here, and the board is 50 people. So if we recommend something, there's going to be 48 people that's going to say, "Oh, but I didn't get a say so on this." So is this just for you guys only that's on your committee, or the board in general? If it's the board in general, then we should send an email out to every member stating for them to come up with some ideas for those 3 sites. Me personally, Gun Hill Road across from Home Depot, we had a very good proposal going there. You had these people from Harlem come in and they wasted almost a year going back and forth with us, making us do what we told them to do that we wanted to see there. And then it got shut down by Councilman King, and we got everything we wanted and nothing happened. For the site on Pearl Tree, unfortunately, that's an M1 district. You cannot really put too much there. Now, we could put probably a training school there because that's a use group 9. So we could put a training school that deals with carpentry, mechanics, like an Apex Tech type of situation. That could go there with no problem, and it will not disturb the soil. And then the other one on Furman, that's just a nightmare waiting to happen, because there's not much we could put there in regards to, trade schools and stuff like that, because the zone don't allow it. So, I mean, that's just my thoughts for these places.
Okay, well, Alfred, I disagree with you on the Furman site, because I think that you could put, like I said, a job training center to me would be perfect there, especially next to an MTA rail yard, because I would frame it as an MTA job training center. Of course, they would have a financial interest, and of course, everybody knows MTA pays very, very well. So, or some other sort of job training center if the MTA is not invested in that. So, I disagree with you. It's just also slightly all your other ideas I agree with. As it pertains to people attending, Alfredo, just like you aren't on the land use committee, but you're here. So I still like to say that every board member has the right to attend any committee meeting, as well as members of the general public. So, again, we had this discussion about everything else. If board members choose not to show up, that's their problem. So I don't expect Mr. Singh or Mr. Stricker or myself, we're not going to relitigate something that if people who didn't care to show up, all of a sudden wants to discuss it in general board meeting. If you notice, I try to shut that down.
I got you. You know what I'm saying? I agree with you 1,000,000,000%, 100%.
Right. So the fact that you're giving us your ideas, I'll just leave it at that, is fantastic, because that means that you care, and that's going to be something that goes to the board. So we appreciate you. I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of the committee, but I can tell you as chair of the board, I appreciate that.
All right. Well, I think, Dr. Burke, you've given us our homework. I would try to coordinate with Mr. Isaac and Keisha and the other committee members on how we can come up with a list of 3 properties and what we can best use them for. And we'll try to have that ready for you when you're back. So lastly, are there any comments, questions before we adjourn tonight's meeting?
One quick comment, Mr. Singh, can we make like a deadline or already set a date as to when we're going to meet again? So just that we can kind of arrange our schedules so that we can, if we're going to have the discussion about the 3 committees, the 3 sites rather, we can just, have a date already set on the calendar so we know.
Right. No, I would prefer that myself. Now, the question is, and procedurally as well, would this be a formal meeting that would have to, George, for example, would have to send out the invite? And I mean, how would it be, Dr. Burke? Can it be like an informal meeting amongst the committee members? How formal does it have to be?
If there's 6 or more members, and it has to go to a meeting, it has to be a formal meeting. If it's less than 6, then it doesn't fall under the open meetings law. right? So if it's 6 or more, then it falls under the open meetings law, and then you have to call a special meeting if you want to meet prior to the June meeting, right? My suggestion is I would just do it all, via email or call or something like that. Or even if, like I said, I wouldn't, I mean, it's up to you, but 6 or more falls under the open meetings law, and you then have to open it up to everybody. So for instance, you already know how Alfredo feels, right? So he suggests that, you send a note out to the entire board. You can do that if you want, but they should have really been here, but you could still do that, or you could designate somebody to do that from your committee. Either way, I need it when I get back.
All right, so I'm going to err on the side that it will be subject to the open meetings law. I have a strong feeling we'd have more than 6 people showing interest in this. So I would speak with George tomorrow, George and or Ursula, as to how we can move forward scheduling this. And Ms. Bond, you would know once I've spoken to George.
Carrie, I'm really strongly for using the email method, because right here you have a nucleus of people who had some very good ideas, and if we just list them and then send it out, maybe we could resolve this a little bit quicker. Because if you're going to go back into another meeting for just this subject alone, you might not get the group that you want to get to solidify this particular question.
Right, but I think the disadvantage of narrowing the emailing to this list of people is that we exclude the other members who may otherwise have an excuse for not being here tonight and might have good ideas to share as well.
Well, if you send it out, then you send it board-wide to everyone, and then give them the listing of the locations and ask for each location their suggestions. But if you're going to do another meeting, virtual meeting, it's going to take long. It's going to take as long as we're here. We've been here for 2 hours on 2 different subjects. And if people have that much time to spend doing this, then so be it. But that's another option.
If I could make a suggestion,
yes,
because we've already had the discussion, maybe you could take it and maybe you could take that information and put it like on a Google form and then email it out to the general board. This way, no one can complain that they didn't have an opportunity to say their piece. And if they have any, other suggestions, give them a line item that says, other comments or alternative choices, whatever. And then everyone, you just get all of that data back and there's the answer.
Good idea, Denise.
Well, not only that, let me just chime in. So, Mr. Chair, if I can suggest something to you. So, as you know, our ad hoc not-for-profit committee chair, Ms. Beatrice Cornell, sent out a questionnaire for the entire community board. And as of the last general board meeting, only 10 board members filled it out. So that should tell you something right there. So if it were me, again, I'm not you, but I would not go through the process of trying to call another meeting. I would do just what Ms. Benitez says. You have your nucleus. I would send out the 3 properties, what you want, give people an opportunity, and call it a day. That's how I would handle it. But again, I'm not you, so however you want to handle it is fine by me.
Okay. Let me just take a quick note of the members we have on. I'm going to drop my email address in the box below. If each one of you could please send me an email, just a blank email, so I have your email address saved. I'll create a group of tonight's meeting attendees and we can start our discussion.
Dr. Burke?
Yes, sir.
All members of the community board are members of the land use committee, right? Or we have designated members?
For what? For what are you talking about?
For the land use.
I would initially start with members of the land use committee, then I would extend it to the entire board. Once you guys have it because most of the board.
That's what I was asking, because I was under the assumption that all members of the board was on the land use.
No,
Okay.
No, it's only, like I said, no, we narrowed that down.
Okay.
Right. So, right.
6 of 6 tonight at the line.
Okay, so I think we'll proceed by way of email, and this will be the nucleus of the brainstorming homework. Are there any final comments before we close tonight?
I would just like to suggest that when you do send out this email, that everybody who contributes ideas just kind of like remember to reply all, so that we're all aware of the different ideas, and it all stays in the original thread, and it'll be easier for you to not only present to Dr. Burke when it's time, but also even like, I don't know if this will have to be presented at our general board meeting. I'm presuming it will be, but it'll keep it all in one thread essentially.
Right, that's important indeed. Okay.
I have a question for you, Ted.
Lopez.
Mr. Singh, did you say you have a question?
No, I see Alfredo has his hand up. Did I forget to put your hand down, Alfredo?
Gallinari against Hutchison.
I mean, I just want to say first, thank you and good job for holding this meeting. You did really good. Appreciate that. Secondly, like Dr. Burke said, and I think I'm going to agree with him 100%. This email was sent out to everybody on the board. Because if I got it, I mean everybody else got it, and I could be wrong. But if everybody that got it, only X amount of us are here, and to try to do this again with 50 people, and we lasted almost 3 hours. Just think how long it's gonna last the next time around. On another note, regarding the Hadcock committee, this lady put a survey together, and there's 50 of us. Only 10 people replied back. So, again, we're here. It's 9:30, 9 o'clock. We're here. Some of us have a little bit more time than others, and everybody's busy. But emails were sent out, notifications were sent out, and if so, I'm not trying to put nobody under the bus. This is just my opinion and my opinion only. Nobody else's opinion.
Appreciate that, Alfredo. All right, so we'll proceed by email. I've already received John's email, Keisha's email. Alfredo, I have yours written down, and we'll continue working on this in the next coming days. So, Dr. Burke, procedurally, do I need a motion?
Yes, I make a motion that I move that this meeting be adjourned.
So moved.
I'm sorry, somebody spoke over someone else. So Dr. Burke made the motion. Was there a second?
So moved, Robert Hall.
Second.
Thank you. Motion so fast, and we're adjourned. Well, you need to take a vote, but I think everybody's ready to go. So listen, you did a fantastic job, counselor. So you really and truly did. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget Parks Committee meeting tomorrow. Also, do not forget to get, for those of you committee chairs, please do not forget to get our first vice chair your mission statements. And if I don't see you, which I want, happy belated Mother's Day for those of you that are mothers. And other than that, I will see you when I get back.
Bye.
Good night, all.
My brother.
Here.
Thank you.
Alfredo.
What up?
All those stores over there by Home Depot, they're empty. The buildings are empty.
Which ones?